Hello, welcome into WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome back. It's our first show in a little while, but we're going to be back here in the studio. I'm your host today, Jeffrey Bazzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, how is your Friday going so far?
Everything so far so good, Jeffrey. I could not be happier with the weather. It's another beautiful day here in Baltimore. Not much more that we could ask for in terms of the weather. But in terms of the sports calendar, it's very exciting as well, too, because we got so much going on. Obviously, the NBA playoffs are just getting underway. We've had the play-ins go on this week, and then the series starts on Saturday. The first one starts, so tomorrow. And then NHL playoffs, the regular season's winding down and the playoffs are going to be beginning soon. That's going to be exciting as well. And then we also have the men's and women's lacrosse teams, both heating up their final stretch of the season before they head into the conference tournament. And we got to talk about that because at least on the men's side, there's been some losses recently.
There have been, and you mentioned the weather being great outside. We've had some notable outdoor sports events recently. We've had the MLB season kicking off. We've had the Masters concluding last weekend. And like you said, the men's and women's lacrosse teams for Loyola are kind of in the thick of their seasons. And the women's team's been kind of in cruise control. The men's team's kind of at a crossroads, but we'll get into that later in the show. But like you said, there are very important indoor things going on right now. And we're talking about the NBA and NHL playoffs. And I guess we'll start with the NBA playoffs because they officially start tomorrow, but this week we've had the play-in tournament kickoff, and the way it works for those who do not know, the 7 seed plays the 8 seed in each conference. The winner of that game earns the 7 seed, and then we have the 9 and 10 seeds play each other, and the winner of that game plays the loser of the 7 versus 8 game, and then that game would determine the 8 seed. But besides that, we've had the play-in almost reach its conclusion. It'll conclude tonight with some games, but earlier in the week we had the Hawks defeat the Heat, who now will go on to play Boston in the first round. We had the Lakers beat the Timberwolves, and now they will go on to play the Grizzlies. And then we had a couple games Wednesday night. We had the Bulls going into Toronto and beating the Raptors, and then the Thunder going into New Orleans beating the Pelicans. So now that sets up 2 games tonight. We have the Bulls going down to South Beach to take on the Heat, and we have the Thunder going up to Minnesota to take on the Timberwolves. I'll start with the Bulls-Heat matchup, Jimmy. These are 2 teams that coming into the year, I mean, the Bulls didn't really know what you're going to get. They have good talent on paper, but the team itself, it's kind of eh. And then you have the Heat. They were the 1 seed last year. They kind of had a pedestrian regular season, but tonight should be a good one. I mean, who do you like?
Well, the Heat are the team that I think is better, right? Like they have better players, and it seems like on paper it should be easy win for the Heat, at least in my opinion. The only concern that I have about the Bulls and from the Heat point of view is stopping DeMar DeRozan and maybe also his daughter's screams too, because that was like a huge thing in the game against Toronto. She was actually causing free throws to be missed with her screams, but unfortunately she's not actually going to be in Miami. That's the disappointing part.
Due to school.
Yeah. So poor Chicago Bulls, I guess, because they're not going to have their secret weapon. But I listen, the Heat look like the team that should be able to win this one. And they're actually a 5-point favorite too at home. But the same thing happened when they played the Heat or the Hawks. And when they were up against Atlanta, I thought it was a game that realistically they should have won. I mean, having a guy like Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, like they have so much talent on that team. And not to say that the other teams don't, it's just that like that I expect a little bit more from that combination. And there's just this team in general, because they also have a great head coach in Eric Spoelstra. They've been there, done that, because they've made the finals in 2020. They had a pretty good, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And now this year they're fighting to get in. And think about it, they had a chance to not even be in the play-in entering this. They shouldn't have had this scenario go on, because you look at where they were, all they had to do was pass the Nets.
Yeah, and the Nets kind of scuffled down the stretch, and they still managed to get the 6 seed.
Exactly.
So going into this game, yeah.
Like Miami's kind of, I feel like, on a downward slope.
I agree. I thought they kind of sleptwalked on Tuesday night, and they didn't really play to their potential. And like you said, they have good players. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo and company. But the Bulls also have DeMar DeRozan, like you said, and Zach LaVine, who's another prolific scorer. So I'm expecting a close one tonight. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if the Bulls won this game.
I wouldn't
I
either.
think I might pick the Bulls just because I think they're a type of team that could keep up with the Heat. Honestly, I would question the Heat's ability to keep up with the Bulls because the Bulls have a lot of scoring. I didn't even mention Nikola Vucevic. He's a good center down low. He's a pretty average
And they
player.
made a big trade for Nikola Vucevic too.
And they've expected a lot out of him. He's been okay.
Yeah, but he hasn't lived up. I don't think he's played as well as he did in Orlando. Like he was put up really good numbers in Orlando, especially on the boards.
Right. And back to last year with the Bulls, they had Lonzo Ball and he didn't really play much, but when he did play, he was making Vucevic very effective. So I think going into tonight, I think those three guys for the Bulls are going to be key. But yeah, I think they're going to come away with the win. I really do. I like kind of how they play and they rely on those three guys. I think they can get it done. But let's go to the 8 seed game out west. We have
I'm
the
excited for this one.
Oklahoma City Thunder going up to Minneapolis to take on the Minnesota Timberwolves. A lot of storylines going into this game, more so on the Minnesota side with Rudy Gobert having that incident with Kyle Anderson last Sunday when Gobert threw that punch, which ultimately led him to an ejection. He missed Tuesday night's game in LA due to an injury, and he's questionable, I believe, for tonight. And also, Karl-Anthony Towns is questionable, but I would expect him to play. But
And then Anthony Edwards was basically out for the fourth quarter. I mean, he didn't score at all, so he basically was out for the entirety of that fourth quarter. I mean, we're sitting here, we're talking about the wrong team.
I know.
This Minnesota team's a joke.
Yeah,
they are a joke.
Yeah,
they got players fighting. Gobert's coming back tonight, right?
He's supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a clown show with him just rolling in there now, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big distraction.
Yeah,
and you're fighting for your season, too.
Yeah, the season's on the line, and we got a clown show going on in Minnesota, and I cannot believe for the life of me that everyone's just expecting the Thunder to not be a factor in this game.
Yeah, I think they could easily win this game. And
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an outstanding player.
Yeah, and I'll talk about the Thunder now. They're the other team in this matchup. They kind of shocked a lot of people when they went down to New Orleans and beat the Pelicans on Wednesday night. And they were in control for most of the game. And it's funny because it kind of gave me vibes of the Wolves-Lakers game from the night before. The road team's up for the majority of the game, but you're kind of expecting the home team to kind of make a run. And the Pelicans did that. But the Thunder made the key plays down the stretch. And you bring up SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was pretty quiet in the first half, and then he definitely played way better in the second half. And Josh Giddey too, I thought was phenomenal. He was just great start to finish.
I like Josh Giddey a lot. He's a really good player, a young player for the Thunder, and he was one of the youngest players ever to have like a triple-double in a game. And I mean, from that point on, that was kind of what put my eyes onto him, and I've been impressed with him because in all areas of the game, he's able to do things. And he's from Australia, I believe.
Yes.
And so he's really good rebounder, amazing passer, actually. Like I would say that's honestly his most underrated ability. And then he's a decent scorer as well.
Yeah, he kind of does everything for the Thunder. But I'm going into the X and O's here. Listen, I know the Thunder are kind of this really good surprise story. They have traded so many players over the last couple of years. They've acquired so many draft picks. I mean, they have so many picks between now and it feels like 2030. But going into this game, I mean, if Minnesota's healthy, they have Gobert back, assuming Towns plays. We know what he brings to the table. He's a top-notch center. And I would assume that Anthony Edwards is probably not going to have the type of game that he did on Tuesday night again. So I think Minnesota wins, but I don't know. I think OKC can definitely make this close. I just think Minnesota at the end of the day, I think they have more experience, and I just think they have a slight talent edge, but I don't know. I don't think it's far off as people think between them and the Thunder.
No, I don't think so either. I would honestly consider them kind of on even footing with the way their seasons are right now, because look at the slopes. The Thunder, I feel like, are going up. They're playing with some energy. They just came off a really nice win where two of their young stars really showed out, especially in the second half. And then we have the Timberwolves, who, number one, just came off a loss. It was a very hard-fought game. And now they have to go back home to who knows, right? What kind of situation, because they have so much drama surrounding their team. And I don't know. It's not really a great situation for Minnesota. Like, it just feels like it's just really going to be tough to overcome.
Yeah. And then you're looking down the road. One of these teams is going to play the Denver Nuggets. I don't see either team beating the Nuggets. I mean, maybe they get a game or two. Who knows? But yeah, I think definitely this is going to be an exciting one. I definitely am more excited for the Thunder Timberwolves game than the Bulls game, but both of the games should be pretty good. But looking ahead, we have the first round starting tomorrow and Sunday. And I'm just going to go in order of the games here. So we have the Nets and the Sixers facing off tomorrow. And that's the 3-6 matchup in the East. And coming in, you're looking at the Sixers, had a pretty good regular season, and a lot of people don't view them on the Bucks and Celtics tier. And I agree with that as a Sixers fan. I don't think we're on their tier. I think we can beat them. I just don't know if you can beat them 4 out of 7. But nonetheless, Joel Embiid, James Harden, you kind of know the deal there. It's a pretty good duo. And then you have some other key clogs there as well. But you look at the Nets, they make huge midseason moves. They trade away Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant. They get a slew of players back, and they kind of are up and down the rest of the way, but they have a lot of capable scorers like Spencer Dinwiddie and Mikal Bridges and Cam Thomas, etc. But Jimmy, what are you looking forward to in this series, and who do you like? Because kind of a interesting, weird matchup we got here.
Well, I think the key is obviously for the Sixers, their star players, right? So it's Joel Embiid, it's James Harden, it's Tyrese Maxey, right? You would agree with that, Jeffrey?
100%.
Yeah, and the guy who's really got to get it done is Joel Embiid, right? Because I would say, is the number one option on this team over James Harden. It's not even really a discussion at this point. And he's the process, right? He's what the whole city of Philadelphia has been waiting for. And at the end of the day, the process only goes down in history how Joel Embiid takes it. So if he can find a way to get this team over the quote unquote hump, and they've had some chances where I really thought that they had special teams. Like when they lost to the Raptors on that awful bounce in 2019, I really thought they were the second best team in the East. Like I thought that
they were right there. And then
right there.
I don't know if you were going to bring up 2021, but that was the year the Sixers were the number 1 seed in the East, and they lost to Atlanta in the second round, who was the 5. I thought that was another missed opportunity. Not saying that team was better than the 2019 team, but the way that the bracket was set up, you think they would be easily in the conference finals, but they weren't.
Yeah, and then that series to Atlanta too, didn't they blow a lead?
Yeah, they blew a huge lead, I believe, in game 5.
Oh, yeah, that was the whole bet.
Another one in game 4, but game 5 was a notable one.
That was the whole Ben Simmons disaster game, and look where that got you. Obviously, that didn't put you in the best situation as a franchise. But looking at this as a whole, this series, I think it's obvious the Sixers have more talent, right? Like they're the better team here. They have the bigger stars. The Nets, the challenge that they have is like, where do they get a lot of their points from outside of Mikal Bridges?
Right, because he's clearly the number one option.
Mhm.
It's just tricky because you have guys who can score. It's just, I don't know, who's your number 2? There's not really a clear-cut number 2. Is it Dinwiddie? Is it Thomas? Is it someone else? I don't know. But I think another key matchup, too, is going to be the Nick Claxton-Joel Embiid matchup, because Nick Claxton's a top-tier defender. So I'm curious how he's going to do against Embiid, because I think he is very capable of limiting Embiid in some capacity. But I think for the Nets, yeah, where do they go on offense besides Bridges? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the biggest concern. And it just seems like the Sixers all around are just a little bit of a better team, more talented team. And it just kind of points their way.
Yeah, I think the question for the Sixers is when Embiid and or Harden are off the floor, and I guess you can include Maxey and Harris too, when they're off the floor as well, where are you going to get scoring? Because the bench has not been good. I mean, we've seen Georges Niang and Shake Milton kind of be key bench clogs for the Sixers over the last couple of years, but sometimes they're very hit or miss. So I think the bench is the key. I think it's more so the key going forward. Maybe they can get away with it in this series, but we'll see. But I fully expect the Sixers to win the series. If they don't win the series, I would be absolutely shocked.
I agree with that. I agree exactly with what you just said there in the last 25 seconds. Everything you just said, I agree with. All right. So what are your thoughts on the Hawks Celtics series? I listen, I think the Celtics are the team to beat in the East. Like it's really not even that close. Obviously, the Bucks are the biggest threat to that, but I respect the Celtics after the way that they ran through the East last year.
Yeah, they're definitely a team that seems like they're destined to not just get back to the finals, but win the finals. I definitely think they have the team to do it. They're just so complete top to bottom. I mean, 1 through 7, 1 through 8, they're just so deep. And I think going into this series against the Hawks, listen, the Hawks, I think, present an interesting challenge. They've been this very, very average team this year. I mean, they've alternated wins or losses across the board, and they have Trae Young and DeJounte Murray to pose a threat to the Celtics. But I'm taking Tatum and Brown and Smart and the Williams and Horford. I mean, I just think the Celtics can score in so many ways. And also their defense is phenomenal. If they can get back to how they were playing defense in last year's playoffs, I mean, I think they've got to be probably the clear-cut favorite, not in the East, but I think to win the whole thing.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, they're right there with the Bucks.
they are right there. They're obviously right there with the Bucks. I don't think that's the question. It's just about those Western Conference teams. I mean, some of them, especially the Suns, the Warriors, they have absolute firepower on
And
offense.
we'll get into them a little later.
Yep.
Um, but if you're looking at Boston in this series, I fully expect them to win this series. I mean, I think Atlanta's going to get a game. Did they get two? I don't know, but I think Boston just has so many different weapons and they can just beat you in so many ways. So that's why I like Boston. They're such a complete team. I
They
will
are.
say though, and this is kind of a personal fandom thing to say, but Boston Philly second round potentially would be kind of crazy.
Yeah, it would be crazy. I mean, I don't know if that's really a good matchup though for the Sixers.
I don't think it is either.
Yeah.
Considering how the season series has gone,
No.
with Boston winning 3 of the 4, but that's definitely a conversation that we could have 2 weeks from now down the road. But yeah, I think Boston wins this in 5. But let's go to another Eastern Conference series, and this involves your team, Jimmy, the New York Knicks. They're back in the playoffs after missing it last year. They were in it in 2021. They're taking on the 4-seeded Cleveland Cavaliers. I think this is a very, very fascinating series. It kicks off Saturday at 6 o'clock in ESPN. You're going into this series. Knicks have had a pretty good regular season. I feel like they kind of flew under the radar. And you see Jalen Brunson. I feel like he kind of burst onto the scene this year. He kind of made the contract kind of worth it in some ways.
I would say he went above and beyond.
Yeah. I thought early on when people were talking about the contract, they're like, really, this amount of money for Jalen Brunson? But I think he's kind of put all that to bed, at least for now. But you look on Cleveland's side, they've been very good all year. They're a very quiet 51 win team. I mean, I feel like people don't really talk about them. And 51 wins is really high number of wins, especially for a team that is as young as the Cavs. But they pose a threat with Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. But Jimmy, what are you looking forward to in this series? What do you think the Knicks have to do to win this series? I think they're very capable of winning the series.
Well, here's for them. I think it all starts with defensive side of the floor because I feel like when they're defending, that's when they're kind of at their best, right? Like they have some very capable offensive players, and I have loved the way that we have played kind of without Julius Randle in recent weeks. We've kind of been forced to rely on some different guys, and I think things have been looking on the up and up, and I love like the way the team has been playing in recent weeks, even though we haven't had Randle, who's considered to be one of our best players. I think it's allowed some other guys to shine, and I know this is going to sound bad, but I'm actually okay with Julius not being in the lineup.
Wow.
Like I think most Knick fans are, just because also at the same time, we remember the last time he was in the playoffs. And if he's not 100%, there's no point in throwing him out there because we already have to worry about this bad Julius Randle in the playoffs type of narrative. And I feel like that would, like, rushing him back in would be, not the best scenario. But at the same time, too, I do realize that he is one of our best scorers. And in the long run, we probably can't win without him. Like, we would probably need a really good Julius Randle if we were going to, do anything in the NBA playoffs. But as for this series, listen, I think it's going to be tough because the Cavs have some good players, right? Donovan Mitchell. What more do you need to say but then just say his name? Like, everybody knows that he's an absolute scoring threat anytime he steps on the floor. And that's the guy that I feel like the Knicks are going to have to worry about the most, in addition to Darius Garland.
Yeah, I mean, that backcourt can score a lot. I mean, if they're combining for, I don't know, around 60, I mean, that's going to be problematic. I think the question for Cleveland is, do they get enough help with Mobley, Allen, and the rest of their bench? But if Randall's healthy, and do you know if he's playing game 1?
He's doubtful right now. We're not 100%.
Kind of sounds a little pessimistic for game 1, but if he comes back, I don't know, some point in this series, I think the Knicks, honestly, I think they match up decently well. And I think having Brunson and Barrett there as other scoring options, not to mention Emmanuel Quickley. Emmanuel Quickley has been phenomenal. I think he can definitely provide some scoring punch off the bench. But
Quickley's been great.
He's been awesome.
Yeah.
I think the Knicks are taking it in 7. I think it's going 7 anyway. I think it's so even. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the home team won every game because I think these home crowds are going to be rocking, especially in New York. I think when the series goes there for games 3 and 4, that place is going to be rocking. But I really do think the Knicks, I think when they're playing at their best, I think they're slightly better than the Cavs.
Well, I mean, you sound a little bit more confident than I am. I still respect the Cavs as a
I
team.
do too.
And I at the same time, they just have, I think, a little bit more star power than we do. Just because at the end of the game, it's not that I don't trust Jalen Brunson. It's just that I know what Donovan Mitchell is capable of, and I've seen him do it. And he's done it in a lot of times, right? Like we've seen Donovan Mitchell make plays in big moments over and over again. So that's kind of where my fear comes from. Although I will say though, Jalen Brunson helped lead a team. I know he was obviously not the top dog on the team, but he did help lead the Mavericks to the Western Conference Finals last year.
Yeah, so he's kind of not been there, done that, but he
Has some
has been in that
experience.
role before.
Mm-hmm.
And also to mention the Emmanuel quickly point, the Cleveland version of that's probably Karis LeVert, and he's pretty good too. He's a capable scorer, but yeah, I think it's just a really even matchup. It's really hard to pick.
Yeah.
It's more so, I think the 4-5 series historically, they kind of are the swing series. They kind of go one way or the other every year. I'm going with the 5 this year. I think the Knicks are going to pull it off.
Yeah, I hope you're right, but I'm not too confident.
It's kind of like my, I don't know, it's not my off the grid pick, but I guess you could call it my off the grid pick. But I do have a 6 seed I'm picking, but it's actually in this next game we're going to talk about the Warriors and the Kings. Very fun first round matchup we're getting here. The Battle of Northern California. We have the Warriors and the Kings facing off tomorrow night on ABC. A lot of storylines here. You look at the Warriors, they're obviously the defending champions, but they are 6 seed. They've had awful trouble on the road this year. And interesting enough, they are on the road to start this series, but they don't have to travel very far. They go to Sacramento. And you look at the Kings, they've had this renaissance season. They came out of absolutely nowhere under Mike Brown, who's in his first year there. And De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis and company, they just have a great, well-rounded team. I think the concern for them going into this series is the experience, number one. And number two, they're dealing with some injuries. So I think that's important to note. So Jimmy, going in, I mean, are you buying the Kings hype that, hey, they're actually like really good? Or are you taking the old savvy vets of Steph, Clay, Draymond, and the Warriors?
Yeah, the Kings are a nice story. It's awesome that they made the playoffs, ending the drought. And I hope that the Kings do put up a really solid performance in this series, but they're going up against, listen, the dynasty of the NBA, essentially. I mean, the Warriors are just not something to mess around with. And every time I feel like we count the Warriors out, there they are back again, ready to, win another championship. Like I remember when Klay Thompson got hurt. Oh, okay, now that's the end. They're not going to be the same Warriors anymore. Well, that wasn't actually the case. And then we also had when Kevin Durant left. Oh, they're not going to be the same Warriors anymore. Blah 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 blah. Well, it didn't matter. Even though I felt like they went through like a phase of kind of rebuilding their team, they have a lot of still really talented players. They've added Jordan Poole over the past couple of years. We saw the effect that he had last year, and he's a really solid player as well. And then we can't forget about the undoubted. You cannot say that this guy is not a crucial part to the team of the Warriors. And that's Draymond Green, right?
Yeah.
Like he does not get enough credit at the end of the day for what he does because they play so much better when he's on the floor.
Yeah, and it's not like he's.
And so, yes, I am picking the Warriors, Jeff, to answer your question.
Yeah, and to reciprocate, I am also picking the Warriors. I'm going to pick them in 6, partly because I do respect Sacramento. I do think it's going to be 1-1 going to Golden State. I just think Golden State's home crowd, and no discredit to Sacramento's home crowd. I actually think they're going to be really, really loud.
Oh, of course.
I mean, they haven't been in the playoffs since we were probably, I don't even know, like 5 years old.
Yeah, and I think great.
3 years old.
I think it was like
even earlier than that.
2004.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been a really long time. And also, too, they are the loudest fans in the NBA.
They really are.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully for their sake, they'll be lighting the beam, as they say out there.
Yeah.
But to your Draymond point, he's so important. And it's not like he's draining threes like Steph, Clay, and Jordan Poole and others. He's just the guy that's kind of setting it up. He's also the heart and soul of that team. I mean,
he leads them in assists.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of the guy that's setting up all those open looks, and he's the heart and soul. I mean, if they're ever feeling adversity or going through tough times, he's always the guy you can rely on to kind of pick you up from that. And he is just a great role model. And also, he does things really well. He sets great screens. He always finds open guys. He kind of lets the game come to himself. Doesn't really force too many things. And when you have a lot of snipers on the team like the Warriors do with Steph, Clay, Jordan Poole, Dante DiVincenzo, etc., I mean, just makes your job so much easier because you're just looking for those guys. And then maybe, I don't know, on occasion, you can fool them by going to the rim because he's capable of, I don't know, having that outburst once in a while of scoring maybe in the teens or the 20s. I mean, it happens. It's rare now compared to before, but he's such a key part to their team. So, yeah, I'm going with the Warriors there as well. Let's go to the Sunday slate. And this is an interesting slate because we still don't know who the Bucks or Nuggets are playing the top seed. So let's go with the Lakers.
Well, I'll tell you
Grizzlies
this: I
first.
don't think either of those play-in teams are going to have a chance against the
Yeah,
Bucks
so we could run through that
Nuggets.
quickly.
Yeah.
I don't think
No,
the Heat or Bulls will beat the Bucks.
no, no,
Like,
no shot.
I honestly think if the Bucks played the Bulls, I think I'd take the Bucks to sweep. I think the Heat would get a game off the Bucks. I really do. Just because I feel like they've had enough history where I think they kind of know each other. But yeah, I think the Bucks win that easily. And then with Denver, I mean,
Minnesota would not win a single game against Denver.
yeah, and it's interesting because I did some like deep diving into this. They played 4 times this year because they're in the same division. They split 2-2, but the 2 times that they played in Minnesota, Denver was coming off a back-to-back from the night before where they played in Denver. So they had to fly from Denver to Minneapolis. So.
Really?
And they rested like their starters, like in one of the games. I think Denver healthy would beat Minnesota in 4.
Yeah, I do too.
I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota got 1, but I think if it was OKC,
I could see them getting 1.
I could see them maybe getting 1.
Yeah, but it would also be really tough.
I don't think they would get 1 in Denver, but
No,
I
they
think
would have to win 1 at
I
home.
think they would get 1 in OKC. OKC's got loud fans too, so we got loud fans. But yeah, I think we're pretty set on the consensus that the Bucks and Nuggets are winning those series. But Lakers Grizzlies, let's talk about that because that's a very fascinating series. We heard a lot of trash talk going on. We heard Dylan Brooks say he doesn't mind playing LeBron in a 7-game series, and now he's getting his wish. And then you're looking at these teams, the Lakers, they started off awful at 2-10. They make some midseason changes. They bring in D'Lo and Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt, and Austin Reeves kind of risen as a key clog on their team. And then you have LeBron and AD who are the mainstays. And then the Grizzlies, it's all about John Morant, and he's kind of had a interesting year where he's kind of dealt with off the court issues, but on the court, he's phenomenal. Jaren Jackson Jr. is great, and they have some other guys who are good too. But what are you looking for here? Because I think some people could see this going a little farther, but at the end of the day, it's all about the X's and O's. So what do you see here?
Listen, I can see the Lakers being competitive in the series. I'm not gonna lie. I expect a playoff LeBron. I expect to see a uptick in the LeBron that we see from, or the LeBron that we're accustomed to in the regular season. I'm expecting to see a little more. This is what he's known for, right? And then also too, another guy that I want to see in the playoffs, Anthony Davis, right? He hasn't been there in a while, and the last time they were there, he was hurt. And that was kind of the downfall for them.
And they still got the 6 games when they lost to Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. And listen, they were hurting without him, but now I think he's playing some of the best ball he has in a really long time. So, and just the Lakers in general, those moves that they made mid-season, I mean, I think they have a chance in this series. And I respect Memphis. They're a very talented team. Like you said, John Morant's a great player. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a really good player. But how about that Steven Adams loss? That's going to be really tough to overcome.
And I'll mention this too. Brandon Clark, their backup center, he's also out too. So they're down 2 centers. Kind of a problem when you go up against Anthony Davis.
Yeah. And in addition to the other guys that the Lakers have that they made moves for.
Rui Hachimura as well. I omitted him by accident early on. He's a good player. He can kind of guard multiple positions.
Yeah, he's a good role player for sure.
Yeah. It's just a tough one.
I'll take the Lakers, honestly. I know I would hate to pick against Santi, the Loyola basketball legend, but because obviously he's playing for the Memphis Grizzlies. But yeah. I think in this case, I'm going to take the Lakers just because they're playing with some of their best ball right now. And I don't know. I just trust the King.
I do too. It's just the Grizzlies, I just think are a little bit better. I think I'll take the Grizzlies in 7. It's so hard though, because I don't know. The Grizzlies are that type of team where, I don't know, they're definitely not disrespected, but I think people don't take them as seriously as people want them to. But you're on the Lakers side. I mean, they've really played so well since the deadline. I actually think they have the best record since the deadline. I think they're 16-7. So that definitely bodes well for them. But I'll take Memphis. I just think they're just, I don't know, the consistency's been there the whole year. I know they've dealt with some stuff, but I think they're still better. But I will say deep down, I'm rooting for the Lakers because I would love to see them kind of go on this little Cinderella run. But let's go to Clippers Suns real quick before we go to the break. This is the 4-5 matchup in the West. This is a potential to be a fun series because you have the Clippers who, by the way, do not have Paul George for the first couple games. So that's a killer for them. He's their number 2 scoring option. And then you have the Suns. They get Kevin Durant at the deadline. He plays a game or two and then unfortunately gets hurt in warmups. He misses a lot of time. He comes back and I still think this might be true. I have to fact check this, but they have a really good record without him. There was one point where they haven't lost without him And I still think that is true, actually, because he did miss their one game last week, but
No, they haven't lost with him.
they have not lost with him. I think they're, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 or 0, whatever that is. But point being, Kevin Durant has made the Suns definitely a better team with more firepower. And you brought up earlier in the show how these Western teams have firepower, and the Clippers have firepower as well, but the Suns definitely have it with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton. So, Jimmy, going into this one, I think this has potential to go kind of deep, but I don't know. Is there a team you like more than the other?
Yeah, I like the Suns. I think they're the more talented team, honestly. I mean, just the guys you named right there. But the pressure's on for the Suns. Like, these guys need to win. These are all players who are in the absolute like prime of their career, with the exception, I'd say, of Chris Paul. He's probably at the back end of his career, but still, the time's ticking for him because this might be his last chance of getting a ring, honestly, unless he does come back next year, maybe a couple of years. But anyway, the point is that window is closing, and then plus in today's NBA too, you never know how long stars are going to stay with their current teams. So that's another thing you got to factor in there too. So who knows? They got to get it done now. And I think they're in a very good position to make that happen, considering the guys that they have. They start with a really great point guard. You can't ask for much more than Chris Paul. They have a really great big guy in DeAndre Ayton. Can't ask for much more than that. I think that they're a pretty complete team outside of just the starting lineup too. Like there's some other guys that step in and do a really good job off the bench.
Yeah.
And just in general, I like the Suns. Like I just like the team that they have. And I didn't even mention this guy's name yet, but Devin Booker. We know what he can do as a scorer. So there's no reason that he can't make things happen out there as well. There's just so many guys that for the Suns can step up whereas with the Clippers, I don't know if I can really say that about any guy except for Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he is Kawhi Leonard, and we have seen him do crazy things. I mean, you can't underestimate the claw.
Yeah, I mean, go back to 2019. I think that's all you need to hear from Kawhi Leonard. But going back to your Suns point, I totally agree. They have more firepower, especially with their starting lineup. And they kind of remind me of the Sixers. They have a very top-heavy starting lineup with 4 primary scorers. And then they have a bench that's kind of okay, not great, not terrible. They have guys who can score, though, for sure. And then you look at the Clippers. On paper, you could honestly argue the Clippers are probably a deeper team just because they play more guys and they have kind of a better bench. But I just think the question is how far can Kawhi carry them with PG being out? And I think the fact that the Clippers have been kind of injured all year, just with different guys out, I just think with Kawhi and PG kind of missing a lot of games in the middle, I just think their chemistry is a huge question mark. And I just don't think that bodes them well. I mean, we've seen them have great teams in the past and they haven't gotten very far besides 2021, but I'm taking the Suns. I think the Suns are kind of destined to make a run. I feel like they have the team that can definitely get it done. I feel like the time's now. I mean, this has got to be it.
All right, really quickly before we head to break here, because we've run through every single matchup. What, in your opinion, is going to be the finals when we're sitting there in June?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, but I'm looking here and I know that there's potential matchups down the road, and I have that in my mind. I think I'm going to stick with my preseason pick. I did take Milwaukee to come out of the East, and partly so just because I feel like, I don't know, there's different teams that come out of each conference every year. So I'm going to stick with Milwaukee coming out of the East. And then out West, it's really tough, but I'm going with the Suns. I do like the Suns, and I think for them, I think they're going to win this first round series. It's going to be tough, but I think the tough one is going to be if they run into Denver in the second round, because they're not going to have home court, and Denver's kind of given it to them this year, but they haven't really played them with KD. So I think that's going to be the tough series, but I think they're more than capable of beating them. And I just think if they're hitting it all cylinders, I mean, Booker and KD are just a dynamic duo, and Chris Paul, if he's doing his thing, I like the Suns. So I think Suns Bucks, they're going to rematch of 2021.
I think we're going to get a rematch 2022. We're going to have Warriors Celtics. That's what I think.
I love it. Yeah. I would love that too, because they definitely gave us a great series. There's definitely going to be a lot of fireworks going on in the next 2.5 months. So it's going to be fun to keep track of. But I think we'll take a quick break here on After the Whistle. We'll come back. We'll briefly touch on the NHL playoffs. We'll also get into the Loyola lacrosse teams as well as touch on some baseball. So stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome back to WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Layla's premier sports talk radio show. I am your host, Jeffrey Bazzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody. We were talking some NBA playoffs before the break, but now we're going to get into the NHL playoffs very briefly. And Jimmy, we have most of the matchups set. Not all of them are set yet because we have two games tonight, one not determining any playoff seedings, but we have the Avs and Predators playing tonight in Nashville. So the way it works is if Colorado wins, they will win the Central Division. They'll take on the Seattle Kraken in the first round, and then Dallas will play Minnesota, and then if not, it would be vice versa. But looking at these matchups, let's go to the Monday slate. That's the first day of games here. Have the Kings and the Oilers, the 2-3 matchup out west in the Pacific Division. Very interesting matchup because the Oilers have kind of David. He's had this absurd season, and you have the Kings who kind of fly under the radar, but they've been solid now for a couple of years. So who do you like here between LA and Edmonton?
Yeah, I'll take the Oilers just because of the offensive firepower that they have. They have McDavid, who's the best player in hockey, and they also have Leon Draisaitl, who's also another really good player. In fact, I'm pretty sure Draisaitl won the Hart Trophy last year.
I think so.
Yeah, so he did. And he's a very talented player as well. So just with that offensive firepower, I mean, that's kind of the advantage that they've had. But the question, as always, for this Edmonton team has been defense and goaltending. And I feel like that is kind of something that's going to affect them in maybe the later rounds. But I think in this matchup, McDavid and Draisaitl and company should be enough for them to get by the Kings.
I agree. I think the Oilers are going to take this series. I think they have played the Kings in the past, so they kind of have some familiarity there. But I think the Oilers are kind of come on at the right time. So I'll take the Oilers as well. Now let's go to Panthers Bruins. That's the number 1 seed in the East versus the second wild card in the East. And we know about the Bruins. They've had this crazy year. They've broken records. They finished with 135 points, which is absolutely absurd. They were 65, 12-5. They broke the record for wins on Sunday in Philadelphia, and then they won at home on Tuesday against Washington to get the points record. So they're taking on Florida, and Florida was good last year. They were, I think, the President's Trophy winners last year, believe it or not. So if I have that right, I'm not sure it was Colorado. I think it was Florida, and it's now funny to see them playing the President's Trophy winners of this year's season.
Yeah, I mean, I think Boston can get it done in the first round against Florida. I mean, I obviously coming off that historic season, like the expectation here is that they win. They obviously have the home ice advantage in the series, so there's obviously some expectation for them to win this series. And I think that at the end of the day, they will get it done. But it's not going to be easy because Florida is a pretty decent team as well.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely lost a little bit of a step from last year, but they still have some guys that are from last year's team. And I think they're going to give the Bruins a fight, but I think the Bruins come away with this series as well. So another interesting series we have in the East is the New York Islanders taking on Carolina Hurricanes. Carolina's kind of been this perennial team at the top of the East, and they haven't broken through yet, but you feel like they're so due. And then you have the Islanders, who they've made some noise in the past. They've been to a couple Eastern Conference finals, ultimately running into Tampa Bay. But this year they got Carolina in the first round, Jimmy. So who are you taking, New York or Carolina?
I'm going to take the Islanders.
Okay.
I know that the Islanders aren't as offensively talented as the Carolina Hurricanes are. But what I will say is that they have a better goaltender, I think. And I know goaltending is really important in the playoffs. So give me the Islanders.
All right. I think I'm going to go with Carolina just because I feel like they're kind of a well-oiled machine, but I'm not going to discredit the Islanders. The Islanders, they know how to win. They've been there, and they have the personnel who knows how to get it done, especially in the warmer months of the year. So I'm going to go with Carolina, though. I just think top to bottom, they're just very complete. And I feel like they're so due to just make a run. I mean, they've sniffed it a little bit, but they haven't really gotten too far. I think this is the year where they could kind of get there. So I'm going with Carolina, but I think it's going to be very entertaining. I think it's going to go 6 or 7. And then we can't really talk about the Stars yet because they don't know who they play. Same with the Avs. We kind of mentioned that earlier, but let's go to Tuesday. We have the Jets and the Knights facing off in Vegas. This is the matchup in the West with Vegas winning the Pacific Division, taking on the second wild card. So Vegas is the one overall seed in the West. Who do you like here? I mean, Vegas, they've been a perennial playoff team. They missed it last year, but they're back this year.
Yeah, I'll take the Golden Knights. I like the way that they have played so far this year. And obviously the expectation is that they would play much better than they did last year. And they've kind of done that. And I trust them, obviously, based on their regular season, just over the Jets.
Yeah, And looking at the Golden Knights, Jack Eichel, who they picked up in the last year or so, he was kind of a key pickup, and he's kind of living up to it. He had 66 points this year. And the Jets had a pretty good year. They started out really hot, actually, and then they kind of fell off. So I think the Knights, with this, their complete roster, I think they're going to take down the Jets. And then this is a fun series, and we have another fun series to talk about after this, but Lightning Maple Leafs.
The Maple Leafs are cursed, man. If they lose this, then what do you do?
I don't know. And then for some backdrop here, we know about the Leafs and how they can't get out of the first round. They're kind of like, and I say this all the time, the Clippers of the NHL. But you look at Tampa Bay, we know what they're about, and they're definitely going to look for some payback after losing in the Stanley Cup final last season. So, Jimmy, who do you like? You like Tampa Bay or Toronto?
I'm going to ride with the curse. I am going to take the Lightning. I think that the Maple Leafs just continue to be the meme that they are, and unfortunately do find a way to get another playoff loss in the first round. That would be insane. It's just because the Lightning have that experience too, and they just have so many guys who are still left, like in terms of like the skill guys, that it just doesn't seem like the Maple Leafs, regardless of the talent that they have, finding a way to get it done. I just can't see it happening.
Yeah, I'm going with you there. I'm going with the Lightning. And to the Maple Leafs credit, I mean, they've definitely been a better team than the Lightning this year. The Lightning actually didn't even hit 100 points, which is kind of crazy considering that we had the Kraken, who are the 7th seed in the West, have more points than the Lightning, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I'm taking the experience. I think the curse lives on. Unfortunately for Toronto, I don't know. They just can't get it done.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Let's go to Rangers Devils. I mean, this is going to be a great one. I mean, you look at the Devils, they've had this kind of year where no one really knew what we were going to get. They have these young talented players, and all of a sudden they burst on the scene for 112 points. And then the Rangers, they've been there the last few years, and they're definitely going to be in the thick of it in the East. And I know this is a fun little New York, New Jersey matchup. So you taking here, you taking the Rangers or the Devils?
Well, the Devils are the young team, right? They're the up and coming team, and the Rangers, meanwhile, they got it all. They have talent, they have stars like Patrick Kane, and then they have, the young kids too. So they just have a loaded roster. And I'm not sure if there's a better top 6 in the NHL right now, if I'm going to be completely honest. So just based from the talent point, I'm going to have to go with the Rangers, which really stinks because I'm hoping for a good series here. But for the Devils, it's just going to be so tough to do well against the Rangers with the talent that they have. And also for the Devils, after that hot start that they had at the beginning of the team or beginning of the season, they haven't been the same team since then. They've kind of been just a little bit above average.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with the Rangers as well. I think it's going to be pretty deep series. I think it's going to go 6 or 7, but I think the Rangers just have more weapons, and I think since they've been there in the past, I think they're going to use that to their advantage. But big picture going forward, Jimmy, who do you like to come out of both conferences, and then who are you going to take to hoist the cup in June?
All right, so I'm going to take the New York Rangers to win the Eastern Conference Finals.
Okay.
And then for the Western Conference Finals, I am going to take the Golden Knights.
That's so funny. I have the same exact Stanley Cup final.
Really?
Yep.
That is crazy.
Rangers Knights. Now, who do you have winning it?
Give me the Rangers, baby.
Okay. So that's where we differ. I'm going with Vegas. I think Vegas finally gets it done. I know they were really close in their first year of existence. They got to the final there back in 2018, I believe, and then they lost to the Capitals. But I think they get it done this year. So that would be a crazy Stanley Cup final. Talk about the entertainment capitals of the world, New York and Las Vegas. That would be really fun.
Yeah, it would be absolutely insane.
So now let's shift our focus. We've talked a lot about playoff sports here, but we're going to go to the lacrosse side of things. And let's go to the Loyola men's lacrosse team first. And I mentioned this at the start of the show, and you could agree with me, you could disagree with me. I just feel like the men's team's kind of at a crossroads right now. We're sitting at 6-4. And you look at that.
It came off a bad loss.
Yeah, 6-4. It's whatever record. But like you said,
I'd much rather be 7-3 right now. Let's put it that way.
And I was expecting that too, but
I think we all were. And the Navy loss at home, that is without a doubt the worst loss on the season.
And for context, that was last Friday. The Loyola lost to Navy 11-10. Really tough loss, just considering it's a team you're playing at home. It's a conference game. You'd think you'd be better than them coming in, and then you just couldn't get it done.
And it was all one kid on the goals for Navy. I mean, they had one kid who was just going off. I mean, everything he shot was just amazing.
Yeah, and I feel like at least at the start of the year, you kind of got this consistency where the defense would start strong and the offense would kind of find its way later in the game. And that was kind of the case through February and the first half of March. And I felt like, I don't know what game it was. Maybe it was the Duke game or the Army game, but I just feel like every game's kind of hit or miss because you see here, we go down to Duke, lose a bad one. They squeak by Bucknell on the road. They lose a tough one in Army. They take care of Holy Cross for the most part, and then you lose at Navy. So it's been a lot of peaks and valleys recently for the men's team. And going to this weekend's game up in Boston against BU, I mean, this is a huge game because honestly, probably Loyola, Boston U, or Navy is probably vying for that 2 seed in the Patriot League tournament, with Army probably going to get the 1 seed barring a collapse. So going to this game, Jimmy, what are the keys? Because we've seen the defense be strong for the most part of the season, but they've
Last game,
shown some signs that it's
it was
not been
not
good.
good last game.
And the offense, you can say what you want. It's been
It goes up and down.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody needs to be a little bit better, right? I think we can agree that it's a whole team effort and it's a team sport. So the first thing is defense needs to improve. But why is the defense always being put in such a bad situation? I think that's a situation we need to ask ourselves. And it's because we lose so many faceoffs. When we're getting killed on the faceoff sometimes, especially when it's multiple in a row, it just kind of kills the morale when the team just wins a faceoff, goes down, scores, wins another one, goes down, scores, and we're not able to score because we're giving up goals, and then we're behind by even more goals, and then we also don't have the ball, so you can't score unless you have the ball, which is kind of the biggest problem because the other team keeps getting the ball after they score. So better defense, winning some faceoffs, I think would just allow the team to flourish a little bit more. But the offense, when they get the opportunities, also has to come up with it because that's their side of it.
Yeah, it starts with doing the little things like face-off and ground balls. You got to win probably more than half of those. But like you said, offensively, defensively, you got to be in sync. You got to be talking. And I think early on in the year, especially with those wins against Maryland and Johns Hopkins, you just saw everyone kind of play together. And now it's kind of getting to a point where you kind of have to reestablish that, because if it gets too late, your season could be in shambles. And I'm not saying that our season's in shambles. I don't think it's there yet, but I think we're kind of in this dangerous territory where we're gonna have to win some games to make the postseason, and more likely than not, we're gonna have to win the Patriot League tournament to probably get into the tournament.
I agree.
I don't think at-large bids are going to be at play, especially in the Patriot League. I think they're only going to get the conference winner just because there's other conferences with a lot of deep teams. So I think kind of getting back to what they did early in the year, I think that's the key, not just this weekend, but going forward.
Yeah, and I thought that started with our defense. And I just thought our defense in the Navy game was not up to par. Honestly, like I thought Navy got a lot of really easy shots. I thought they were really easily able to just run up the field on a lot of plays. They just put themselves in such a good position half the time that it was just so hard for our defense to not give up a goal, because Navy just put themselves in a spot where all they had to do was make one quick pass, and then the guy was right next to the goal. And of course, he's going to score when he's right in front of the goal. And lacrosse is a hard sport to make those saves in. And when you get great shots like Navy was, they're going to hit them, right? So I think it's just an all-around defensive stepping up effort, along with the offense just making the most of their opportunities.
Yeah, you got to.
And the offense fought back in that game against Navy too.
It did. And defensively, like you said, you got to take away the open shots at the top of the key. And then you also just can't put too much pressure on your goalie. In this case, it's Luke Stout. So I think you got to find a way to just, I don't know, be better, but also just do the little things right. And hopefully the rest will take care of itself. But let's go to the women's side. They are number 11 in the polls. And
they just had a nice win over Princeton.
They've been cruising. They went up to Princeton, won 20-10 to improve to, I believe, what it is, an 11-2 record, if I have that right. And Jimmy, I feel like ever since the women have lost those 2 games, one down in Florida and then the other close one at home against Syracuse, they've been cruising. And I've been so impressed with the offense. I'm not saying I was expecting them to score a lot of goals this year, but they definitely have the personnel to do so. I mean, I'm just going to read off the goal totals for this win streak: 16, 15, 19, 20, 23, and 20.
The offense is just firing at will right now.
Yeah, and Jillian Wilson's been a big part. She's won, I think, Patriot League Player of the Week a couple times in the last few weeks. So she's definitely been a key reason for the offensive explosion. But yeah, I think going forward, they just kind of continue to fire off some wins and kind of just continue to be in sync. They have a big one this weekend, tomorrow, actually, at home against Army, who's ranked number 15. So that's definitely gonna be another big test. So I think
Ye-
going forward, they're right in there like last year.
And it's nice that they're going to get another test that's within the conference. So hopefully they can, once again, get the offense going, get some goals going, and get a big win.
Yeah, I mean, I have all the confidence in the world in the women. I think they're a team that has been around for a little while now, and I think I'm not saying they're due to make a run, but I feel like
It's
they
tough.
have the talent. I
Yeah.
mean, last year they were close to getting in the Final Four, and I don't see why they couldn't be in the same position this year.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Jeffrey.
So, really quickly before we wrap up the show, let's touch on some baseball.
Yeah, let's hear about your Phillies, Jeff, because they're kind of disaster right now.
Yeah, it's been not a great start. The Phillies are sitting at 4-9. They came off the opening road trip at 1-5. They had a 3-3 homestand where they won 2 out of 3 against the Reds and then 1 out of 3 against the Marlins. And then they dropped the opener last night against the Reds in Cincinnati. So hasn't been the greatest start. And I mean, I'm not one to single out players, but Aaron Nola has been subpar. He's definitely not pitching like himself. I don't know if it's pitch clock fatigue, whatever. We've seen JT Realmuto struggle mightily. I mean, he's striking out a lot. We've seen Kyle Schwarber recently do better, but I don't know. It's just hard when you don't really do much besides hit home runs. And then there's been bright spots like Brandon Marsh, Bryson Stott, Trey Turner's been okay, but it just feels like every night something goes wrong, whether it's the bullpen giving up a run or two in a bad spot, the offense only scoring 2 or 3 runs. I mean, it's the same story every night. It's something going wrong, but it's a different thing going wrong.
Yeah, and when that happens, it's like, where do you go? Because it just seems like a new problem pops up when one you think is solved. And for a team like the Phillies, I feel like they need an energy boost. And I feel like the only way that's going to come is with a big addition. And you know what the big addition will be? When Bryce Harper comes back. So honestly, if I'm the Phillies, we got to tread water until Bryce gets back. Hoping like mid to end of May, right? That's like the
Think so.
expected return. So, if you can just make it through the next month of the season, maybe like 4 or 5 games under 500, just somewhere where you're competitive. I mean, it's going to be like the first 30, 40 games. So, hopefully if you're just somewhere in the 20s with your record, somewhere around 500, you can hopefully make a run like you guys did last year, right? And then also the hope would be just later in the season, you could make some other moves too.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 things that I want to point out. One is Rob Thompson's lineups have kind of been interesting because he rested Marsh last night, and I'm not sure why, because he's been one of the best hitters on the team. He's been raking at the plate. I'm not sure why you just give him a random Thursday off, but that's another conversation for another day. I think.
Oh, you must not be familiar with Aaron Boone then. Aaron Boone rests players all the time. Just
Yeah,
because guy needs a day off.
like you can give people days off, but if they're playing 2 times and then they get a day off, then they play 2 times and get another day off, I just don't see the reason.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's frustrating.
It's one thing if you play for 2 weeks in a row and then you get like a Thursday or Sunday off. I get that, but especially for catchers too. But
yeah, well,
this guy's an
catcher's one-
outfielder.
yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I was going to bring up is first base is kind of an issue because obviously Reese Hoskins going down in spring training is a killer. But then you have Derek Hall, who's kind of his replacement. He gets hurt in the first week of the season. He's out indefinitely. So you're kind of platooning Alec Boehm at first, and then you're kind of seeing who else can play first. And they've actually, I don't know if you saw this, they're trying Bryce Harper at first base, which is an interesting little kick there.
Might keep his career going even longer. Who knows?
And especially with the DH now in the NL, there's a little bit more freedom. So if you wanted to maybe put Schwarber at DH to kind of take him out of the outfield, I mean, that could help. And then you put Harper at first base. I mean, it gets those guys in the lineup. But yeah, I think the Phillies need to right the ship, like you said, and tread water. But
really quickly though, I want to hit on this. Have you seen the Tampa Bay Rays?
Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
Yeah, we can't not talk about them here as we wind down. Yeah, the Rays are 13-0. The run differential is just insane.
71.
71. And the Yankees are 19, Twins are 24. Nobody else in the AL.
Yeah, the Brewers are 25. They're the closest team to Tampa Bay,
which is insane to think about.
Yeah.
Nobody in the AL is anywhere close.
They're just blowing out teams left and right.
Yeah, it's insane. And I will say, though, they have not had the most challenging teams.
That's true.
And you would be kind of wrong if you didn't say that because, no offense, the Nationals, the Red Sox, and I think it was Tigers or the
A's
Oh, the A's. I'm sorry, the A's
and the Tigers.
and the Tigers. Okay, it was the Tigers and the Rays, or the Tigers and the A's. Yeah, that's not the best groups of teams. Let's just be honest. Like, I think every one of those teams that they played, you could say, is expected to finish last in their division.
Yeah, and they'll definitely get a bigger challenge.
Maybe not the Tigers, just because the Royals are pretty bad too. But it's up there for discussion.
Definitely, and I definitely think they will get a greater challenge this weekend because they go to Toronto, and Toronto's a pretty solid team. So
Yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if they drop one there maybe tonight. But
yeah.
it's definitely a crazy storyline to follow. But I guess to close the show, we'll talk about your Yankees. They're sitting, I think, at 8-5.
Yeah,
Decent record. I feel like it's been mostly good for them so far.
no, it's been mostly good.
Like,
for
what
them.
have you seen?
My concerns are one, the manager. He just makes too many dumb decisions. Aaron Boone is just I didn't like the way that he managed the first opening game against the Orioles in that series. It was just not good. Starting pitching is a nightmare right now. Clark Schmidt stinks. Burrito last night, who had put up two decent performances, not for like quantity, like not a lot of innings, but he gave us like 1 run, 5 innings, which you need that with our pen. We could take care of 6, 7, 8, 9 with the guys that we have. But last night, I mean, that was brutal. I mean, 11 runs in the first inning, or
That's a
9
tough
runs
one,
in the
yeah.
first inning. That's tough. And then it just obviously was kind of downhill from there. But for the most part, I've been really excited with the team. I love the way that Gleyber Torres has played. He's been the guy that I've probably liked the most. And then Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole has been pitching amazing. I've really enjoyed that. Obviously with Judge, Rizzo, you know what you're going to get. They're kind of power hitters, but Judge can obviously do it all. So he's really fun to watch as well. My only other concern, I guess, would just be making sure I never have to see Aaron Hicks on the field again. But until that has switched, I guess that's problem number one.
Yeah, I think the bright spot for pitching, I mean, I guess Nestor Cortez has been okay, and he's starting tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And you have Garrett Cole there, and he pitched really well, I think, his last time out.
We expect to win when Garrett Cole and Nestor Cortez are on the mound. Like, that's an expectation.
And then I'm not bringing this up like as a joke, but it's kind of funny. Like, Franchy Cordero is leading the team in RBIs.
Yeah, Franchy Cordero has played really good, and I'm not expecting this for the full season. I'm not unrealistic. I know how baseball works. I realize that the guy could go on a month cold streak and virtually be worthless to us, but right now it's really awesome to see, especially because he was a guy that we kind of just picked up like really last minute before the season starts. But Bader and Donaldson are working on their recovery, so hopefully they'll be back soon. And then in the pen, we'll be getting some reinforcements a little later on in the season, so we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I know this is early to say this.
The arm bar, not the pen, the arm bar.
It's early to say this, and we kind of agreed on this when we were doing the MLB preview a few weeks ago, but I thought the AL East was going to be a pretty competitive division. I think so far it's been that way. I mean,
absolutely.
You look at Tampa Bay, they've obviously won all 13 of their games, and you look at Toronto and New York, they're 8-5 respectively. Baltimore's been like a respectable team this year, and maybe they're going to take a step forward. And even Boston with kind of their, like, I don't know how to say this, but
awful roster.
Yeah, they have like a weirdly constructed roster.
It's not a good roster.
Like, I think
weirdly
they can be a team where, like, I don't know, if you're playing them in September, like, I definitely think they could play spoiler. I'm not saying they're going to be in that position, but they could be like I don't know, like, you wouldn't want to play them as like a scary, like, 70-win team, like, down the road. Like, I'm not saying they're going to be like 70 wins, but like, I think like for having like a last place team, like, that's a good last place team, I think, compared to other ones.
I guess so.
They're not like the A's or the Nationals.
But I guess so. But what's the difference, honestly?
I do think those top 4 teams are better, though.
Yeah,
I agree with that. But that'll do it here on After the Whistle. Thank you, as always, for listening. We will be back on Monday talking some NBA playoffs and baseball and some more hot topics in the sports world. So thank you again and have a great weekend.